called Asian Pacific Islander Forward Movement. Currently, we have a presence in the San Gabriel Valley, and our headquarters, which is based out of downtown LA. And so a little bit about our organization and who we are. So we are one of the only API serving community organizations focused on health and environmental justice in the nation. APIFM cultivates healthy and long-lasting and vibrant API communities through grassroots organizing. So this is just kind of a timeline of our organization. So we were founded in 2007 under a different name. At the time, we were known as APIOPA, which stood for Asian Pacific Islander Obesity Prevention Alliance. And throughout the years, we've grown and focused on more than just obesity prevention and more than just food justice and so we decided that we need a name change to align with our organization more and the works that we began to expand into. So in 2017, we became API Forward Movement, and which is what we are today. And so this is kind of a overview of all the programs that we have under our umbrella. And annually, we serve about 7,500 families through 8 different languages. And we have a breakdown of our projects, and they're broken down into categories such as healthy food access and education, active living and transportation, and then environmental justice, which is what we're going to be focusing on today, because that's where our Clean Air SGV campaign falls under. And so for today, we're gonna kind of just be doing some intro to our work, which I briefly covered, and then we're gonna go dive deeper into our Clean Air SGV work and why this is important to us. So a brief overview, Clean Air SGV started in 2017, and in between 2017 and 18, we were able to install over 50 purple air sensors throughout the San Gabriel Valley. And in 2019, we were provided with an opportunity to install 64 more sensors. And so that's what we're trying to do now. We're still working on the installation of these additional 64 sensors. And I know due to COVID-19, this has become a little more of a challenge for us because of social distances practices and you know, for folks to stay away from each other as much as we can. So this has definitely been a challenge for us, but we've been trying to work our best with residents of the city of Alhambra and Monterey Park to find creative ways for us to assist them in installing sensor, whether it be through providing instructions step-by-step, or whether we can provide you with a phone call and walk you through the installation process. And so the main goal and why we're doing this is to collect data and identify any trouble areas and advocate for better air quality. And so that's really the main purpose, and how we're able to do that is through these purple air sensors that we're installing. And so why all this matters. So, you know, it probably is not a surprise to you that I'm mentioning that, you know, poor air quality affects our health negatively. And a lot of you all are familiar with this. And depending on the size of the particles that we're inhaling, it affects us in different ways. So something that we'll be paying a special focus on today are particles that are 2.5 micrometers, or what we'll refer to as PM 2.5. And so PM 2.5 particles are able to penetrate, you know, our skins and our pores based solely due to its size. And some of the health effects that it'll affect us in can cause lung cancer, can cause pneumonia, chest pains, and even increase asthma attacks. And so, um, you know, poor air quality can affect us very differently at different uh, age, affect us differently based on our ages. So it can affect us even before we're born. So for uh, pregnant women, it can affect them negatively and cause high blood pressure and sometimes even cause some birth defects. And for babies, it can be premature birth, and in our children, it could cause smaller lungs being developed, which leads to other lifelong effects. Uh, and in adults, uh, could go into could I'm sorry could could cause heart disease and even strokes. And for our seniors, it can be as severe as shortening some of their life by just being exposed to pollution or by living near roadways that emit high levels of pollution. And some of these are just some articles that have been posted throughout the years, just to highlight, even air pollutants during pregnancy may contribute to childhood abnormalities in the brain, uh, pollution aging the brain, and even low-level air pollutions may cause harm. Right. So these are just some of the articles that have been published throughout the years, and so. Uh, what's in the air that we breathe? There's primarily made up of nitrogen and oxygen, but in addition to that, there's also water vapors, carbon dioxide, argon, and other gases, and even ozone or O3, and commonly referred to as smog, right? And so this next slide that I'm showing you um, should look fairly familiar, right? Much of us live or work in Alhambra, Monterey Park, and this freeway is probably what we use the most to either go home or to go to work. And this wasn't taken on a particular weekend. I think I took this on a Monday afternoon, roughly 4 p.m. And so this should be pretty alarming to us. The amount of traffic that moves through the region, and so every time these cars pass by, they emit these particles, these pollutants, right? And so, what is considered as an air pollutant? So air pollutant is basically any substance in the air that can cause harm to humans or animals. And particulate matter is what's on this bottom right corner, labeled as PM 2.5. And the reason, and in a little bit, I'll go over why we are paying more focus to PM 2.5. But what is particulate matter, or what is PM? This might be a new terminology that you're hearing, but particulate matter is basically a complex mixture of extremely small solid and liquid components. And when we look at this infographic on the right, human hair is anywhere from 50 to 70 microns in diameter. Beach sand is somewhere around 90. But PM 2.5, what I keep talking about, are these particles that are 2.5 microns. So, roughly 25 times, 20 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. But these aren't necessarily the smallest particles in existence. There are other particles that are smaller, which are called ultrafine particulate matter, and those are anything less than 100 nanometers in diameter. But today, we're really focusing on PM 2.5, and the reasoning behind this is because a lot of our regulations or regulatory agencies look at PM 2.5 as as the particle size to set restrictions or regulations to. And so how long do these particles stay in the air? It depends on three processes. So there's a process called sedimentation, condensation, and coagulation. And so sedimentation is basically when gravity pulls particles out of the air and then causing, these particles to settle onto surfaces or on the human level. And then condensation is when the moisture in the air collects with these particles and then gives the sedimentation an opportunity to then pull these particles down into the air, onto the surface. Coagulation is when the smaller particles collide to form larger ones, then allowing them to settle onto the surface once again. So for particulate matter or PM2.5, they're able to stay in the air from anywhere from a few days to several weeks. So depending on the weather phenomenon at the time and depending on the level of condensation and et cetera, PM2.5 can actually stay in the air for quite a bit of time. And so where do these particles come from? So there's also three processes or three ways in which we've identified how they are emitted into our region. So there's a process called combustion, evaporation, and weather. And so the little infographic on the right shows us some of the opportunities of where these particles come from. So combustion is burning of fossil fuel, burning of woods, and then there's evaporation, which can be from any moisture-related emissions, and then there's weather, which are some of the natural phenomenons that occur that bring these particulate matters or PM2.5s into our vicinity. So this is typically this workshop is done in person, and so this is the kind of the interactive part, and where I ask you, what do you think this process is based on the three that I just talked about, And so this is an example of a combustion. So this is an example of combustion of how PM2.5 levels are emitted in our region. This picture shows the burning of the fossil fuels. And this next one, this example shows a process of evaporation, because those are steam stacks that we see in the background. So because it's steam, there's the moisture involved, so it evaporates into the air, causing the coagulation piece. And then this next one is a sandstorm, and so this would qualify as one of the weather phenomenons that would bring PM2.5 levels into our vicinity. And so, so this next one is where typically it gets a little bit tricky, because a lot of times folks see this, and because in Southern California, we experience quite a bit of wildfires. And so a lot of times folks will say, oh, this is also a weather phenomenon. But in reality, this would qualify as a combustion phenomenon, just because it's the burning, the burning specific portion of it that causes, the emission of the PM2.5. Okay. And so where do particles come from in our specific region? So we live in an area called the South Coast region, and more than 80% of our air pollution comes from mobile sources. So our mobile sources are split into two. So there's something called on-road mobile and off-road mobile. And then the other 20% is made up of stationary sources and area sources. And so in a second, I'll also be going over examples of what are on-road, off-road, and then stationary as well. But before I go into that, just to put into perspective, 80% is a huge number. 80% of our air pollution, really comes from mobile sources. And so some of you may not be familiar with what, the South Coast region is, but this slide kind of depicts what the South Coast region uh, really is. So it's mostly LA County, some of San Bernardino County, all of Orange County, and then some of Riverside County, which falls under this region. And the reason why it's called this region is because it's we're under managed by the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And so the highest percentile of both fine particulate matter and percent non-white is where San Gabriel Valley primarily is. And so this is particularly alarming. And so as promised, typically this is also where in person, this is the interactive portion, but I'll go ahead and share with you all what all the examples are of stationary and area. And so typically, the image on the right is from local sources. So that's a oil refinery down in South LA or down in closer to Long Beach area. And so what also qualifies to be in the stationary and area source of particles would also be power plants, gas stations, road dusts, paints, restaurants. So these are all contributing factors to particles categorized into the stationary and area source. And then for the on-road mobile, this is a very good image, but kind of a trick as well. So this is also an image I took the same day I took the earlier image. But what qualifies as on-road are cars, buses, trucks, and motorcycles / scooters. So these are all mobile sources that are on our streets, on our freeways. And this image is particularly tricky because we captured the train. And so a lot of times, because people see the train in this image, they'll say it's also considered as an on-road mobile, but actually it's considered as one of our off-road mobile sources. And so off-road mobile sources are anything that any type of transportation or a truck of some sort or something with a motorized engine that does not move on our traditional city streets or highways. And so what qualifies under this are ships, planes, trains, and then even construction equipments. And so in this next image, we really highlight our local major refineries, our major airports and cargo ports. And although we living in the San Gabriel Valley, we don't have a particular major airport that's relatively close to us. But if you didn't know, the city of Alhambra and Monterey Park are under two major airports landing patterns. So LAX has most of their international flights circle above the two cities before they go into their final approach. And then for Ontario, most of their international flights from Asia make their descent over our 10 freeway. So they follow the 10 freeway, they run parallel to the 10 freeway until they arrive at Ontario. And then our cargo ports, although there's only two, but in the next image that I show you will be fairly alarming and we'll go over the reason why the two cargo ports are also highlighted. And then also refineries. We have 6 major refineries in the South LA region. Although on a normal given day, it may not affect us in the San Gabriel Valley all too much, but there's been a couple of incidences where some of these oil tankers catch on fire in our cities or in our neighboring cities, and releases huge plumes of particles into our airs. And so this image that I'm showing you are the amount of cargo trucks that move through our region per day. So this image was developed in 2007, and I'm very confident to say that since the creation of this image, the numbers in volume has increased. But even back in 2007, the Southern California region experienced more than 15,000 trucks, cargo trucks moving through, our areas in a day. And so, although in Southern California we have only 2 major cargo ports, just to think about the amount of cargo traffic that continuously moves through this area day to day with only 2 major ports. And so what that also brings me into to talk about next is really the goods movement, right? And so this image or this infographic starts at factories, but really our goods movement begins much earlier than this. All of us on this call, are able to join this call because we either have a computer or a laptop or another smart device. And so really thinking about the battery that are in our devices, or some of the expensive minerals or that it requires to build our devices. So there is a mining phase even before the factories, and once these raw materials are mined and then transported to the factories, then it's developed there and it's put together. Then they're transported via boat into, and then moved into a cargo port, and then through from the cargo port moved to distribution centers, and then once it gets to distribution centers, then they get dropped off, to your doors. And really to think about how online shopping has really revolutionized our day-to-day lives. For myself, growing up, I probably didn't receive a package or any type of online deliveries more than twice a year. But now it's gotten so convenient that oftentimes there's 2 to 3 delivery services that come to my door in one day. And so really to think about is this necessary, and whether or not there's something else that we can do. And so some things that I know Amazon is starting to do is to allow you to lump all your delivery service, or all your purchased goods to be delivered in one day of the week, or if you could have them just drop off at a Amazon locker and you could pick them up at the locker. And really just some of these, just thinking about possibly limiting our footprint and lowering the amount of deliveries that come to our communities. And let's see, for this next slide, this is typically also a slightly interactive part of our workshop. And so typically what I would ask is, how far away from a major roadway should you be? And a lot of times folks will say either as far as possible or 400 meters. But what's actually recommended to us by a lot of our regulatory agencies is at least 100 meters. But, 100 meters is approximately the size of a football field, including its end zones. But, from the front door of that house to that first lane in the freeway, do you think there's 100 meters in distance there? I'm not an expert in distances, but I highly doubt there's enough space to put a football field between that front door and the freeway. And this is kind of just for us to think about, some of our neighbors in the cities are put in a much more disproportionate uh, um, scenario where to live in an affordable home means giving up potentially healthy air. um, and so what are we doing as an organization? So what we're really doing is we're trying to install these sensors. So these are called purple air sensors, and this image that's shown is basically what comes in a complete kit. And so number one is the sensor itself. Number two, three, and four are basically the power outlets. We have since transitioned away from this power outlet specifically that you see, and we are using a different one by Nest, just because there was a recall in one of the capacitors in the past, and we've upgraded the power adapters. And then, so how do these sensors work? So at the bottom of these sensors, there's two lasers, and this is just to eliminate redundancy. And once these sensors are installed for a long period of time, the two lasers or the two sensors are able to basically check on each other and to project a more accurate number. And so there's a laser particle counter inside both of these, and there's a fan that basically is sucking air into the laser, and this laser particle counter just picks up the amount of either zero microns. I'm sorry. The laser picks up the particles that come through, and it's able to pick up particles anywhere from 0.3 microns to 10 microns. And so, what do I do after I'm able to pick up particles, or what's next after I install this purple air sensor? So once you install this purple air sensor, you can utilize a website called purpleair.com. And so even before you install one, you can use this because this is an open source website. And so when you go on to the Purple Air website, you're able to see a map based on whether or not you allow your location, or if you would like to type in your address. That's up to your preference. But when you click a dot, something like this shows up. And so, and then a 7-day trend also shows up. And so how do we read this? And so the colors all mean a different thing. And in a second, I'll go over what the different colors mean. But basically, green means good. And then as it progresses into red, purple, and brown, it gets worse and worse and worse. And then the AQI numbers, I'll also go over in a second. But really, the 7-day trend is also to show you on a day-to-day basis, are there particularly times of days that, we should be aware of being outdoors, or whether or not we should be outdoors. And then also, maybe we should shift some of our outdoor activities around onto different times of the day where the particulate matter levels are lower, right? And with these sensors, we're really able to do localized air quality. We're able to do more localized air quality experiments, and really to dissect information. And so a large majority of these purple air sensors are currently installed in California. So in November of 2018, we were able to monitor all the different activities that were happening in our state. So for some of you that may not remember, this was around the time when Sonoma County, wine country, Bay Area, there's lots of wildfires up north. And then here in Southern California, we had several outbreaks um, of, um, of wildfires as well. And so if you look at some of their trends, they were going upwards into the 500, almost 500 range, and beyond 250 range in terms of particulate matter. And so in this next slide, this kind of tells you the breakdown of, um, what's recommended based on the different colors, and then um, how, how do we arrive at either a green, a yellow, red, or purple. So when there's, anywhere from 0 to 29 microns per cubic meter worth of particulate matter, then the health risk level is low. So this is when it's recommended to participate in outdoor activities. And then from 30 to 69 microns per cubic meter, it becomes medium. And so for folks with sensitive health conditions to air pollution, it's not recommended to be outdoors. And then 70 to 499 is when everybody may begin to experience health effects, and then 500 is when the risk level is very high, meaning it's even doubting the fact that the sensors are working properly, but it's really because there's just a huge amount of particulate matter. And so just to look back at this graphic, we surpassed that 250 microns per cubic meter level during that wildfire season. And later on, in just in a couple more slides, I'll share with you on our findings from this recent 4th of July data, and a true example of what we're able to do with more localized sensors and how we can dissect some of this information. And so this current slide that you're looking at is basically a comparison of our purple air data installed at Marquepo High School in comparison to a weather station data. And so the weather station that's actually closest to the city of Alhambra Monterey Park is located in downtown LA, just outside of Chinatown. And so what we were able to find, or what we were able to see, was that the purple air data and the weather station were had very similar trends, meaning that the purple air data the purple air data is reliable for us to use, in a sense that there were a couple of scenarios where the purple air sensor data was more saturated than the weather stations. And some of this could have been from either somebody close by to the sensor was smoking, or there was a barbecue, or if there was an outdoor activity on the school that day and some of the dirt was kicked up. These could all be the scenarios in which cause these saturated spikes. And so what we were able to find from these purple air sensors at Marquepo High School as well was that the closer in proximity they were to the 10 freeway, the higher the particulate matter. And so the average particulate matter level during rush hour, the closest one to the freeway was at 26 microns per cubic meter. And then the ones about 20 meters south of the freeway then fell to 23, and then 22 for the one that was approximately 100 meters away. And so what else we were able to find from our Marquepo High School sensors were that we did a 12-month daily AQI analysis, and we found that November was the month with the worst air quality in 2018. And so November 2018 was also when we had the Northern and Southern California wildfires, but we also had a week off. And during that week off for Thanksgiving was consistently when we had almost every day of poor AQI, and which allows us to assume that this could have been because a lot of folks were at home and just enjoying their time and potentially just barbecuing. And so, as promised, this is very recent findings that we've conducted, and you guys are the first group that actually are seeing this, because APIFM has not really shared with anybody else yet of our findings. But a colleague and I compared the purple air sensors from two sensors in particular, one located in Alhambra, one located in Monterey Park, and we quickly compared 4th of July fireworks particulate matter levels from 2019 and 2020. And I personally actually was not here in Southern California during the 4th of July weekend. So I don't know how severe or how bad the fireworks were, but hearing from friends, they told me that, it just sounded like constant, it's just constant, like, gunfire, and sounded like a war zone. And so when I came to this conclusion, and I found that, it more than doubled the particulate matter levels at their individual peaks, then that's when I've come to realize that it really was pretty bad in terms of the amount of fireworks that were lit this year. And so if you remember earlier in the other slide, anything over 500 is considered as very healthy, and oftentimes, it if it reads anything over 500 microns per cubic meter, it even tells you that potentially the sensor is broken, because that's how large of a emission, or how much particulate matter there is in our air, right? And so in the upcoming days and weeks, we're going to continue to analyze more and more data, and we're going to compare our findings from these two sensors with the additional sensors that we have, just to confirm that, this wasn't an isolated incident from one sensor, and that, there in fact was not the sensors were in fact not broken, and it wasn't an isolated incident. And so we're gonna, in the next coming couple of weeks or so, we'll have a more detailed findings in regards to this 4th of July data. Okay, and so as we come close to the end of our educational workshop, there are a lot of things that we can individually do, but what we do recommend is, if possible, to seek alternative environmentally cleaning methods. I know during COVID-19, it may not be the easiest thing to do, but if you're interested, there's a website called www.ewg.org. So you can look up, any of the cleaning supplies that you're currently using, or any of the household products that you may have at home, and it gives you a rating on this website where, it'll give you, as if a report card, it'll give you A, B, C, D, and then F ratings on how healthy it is to your body, or how unhealthy it is, and then also potentially other recommendations that are very similar, that are better for your health. And then something that we do recommend is to purchase locally grown produce to lower transportation needs. And so this may not be the easiest, for everybody. Everybody may have a different preference in produce, and they may not necessarily be available at your local farmer's market. But when and if possible, it is recommended to potentially purchase from purchase produce that are locally grown. For us here at API4 Movement, all the produce that we source to through our Food Roots program are from farmers in the Central Valley. And so, you know, we really do wish that, you know, one day everybody can source produce from our local farmers. And for us, you know, living in Los Angeles, although it may be very difficult to seek alternative transportation methods, if and when possible, you know, consider carpooling. It is very difficult, but if you can, that'd be great. And then also a recommendation from us would be, if you're interested, to please install and host a Purple Air sensor. These sensors retail for approximately $250, but we're giving these to residents of Alhambra Monterey Park for free at no cost. All that we ask, you know, for you is to attend one of these educational workshops, so that, you know, you kind of have a gist of why you're doing this, why this is important. And so, and, you know, the main thing is, you know, your interest level in hosting these sensors. Something else that you can do is, you know, invite friends or family, neighbors to attend one of these workshops. Typically, you know, these are done in person, so they're a little bit more interactive. But we're working with what we're given right now, and you know, we're trying to do the best that we can with the tools that we're given. And so another thing that, you know, you could really support our campaign would be hosting us or hosting me to present this educational workshop to your groups. You know, some of you may be a part of a PTA, some of you may be a part of maybe an organization, and if you can provide me with, you know, 15, 20 minutes, I can give you a very short version of today's workshop. And if not, then, you know, if you know somebody that would be potentially interested in having me present, connect me with them, and I'll try my best to chat with them as well. Another thing that you can do is attend your city's planning or environmental commission meeting, just so that you understand what your city is doing and what direction they're going towards in terms of air quality. I know a lot of the, I think the city of Alhambra and Monterey Park are currently adopting their environmental policies. I forget the exact keyword, but I believe they're both adopting some sort of environmental policy right now. And so another opportunity that we have for the residents of Alhambra Monterey Park is that we need your input. And so you can fill out a very quick survey. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, but by completing this survey, letting us know about your air quality or your interest on air quality, you basically qualify for a $10 gift card once you complete this survey. And so if you're interested, you know, feel free to go to our website, www.apifm.org/cleanersgv, just to take the survey. And so, and I'll be taking some questions. Let's see.
Actually, Kevin, I do have a question. So does APIFM do anything in regards to citizen science with families?
Not at the moment, no, or not to my knowledge.
Did either Janet or Emily have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
No?
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have any questions either.
Something that may qualify as citizen science that we have been doing is that we've been working with AUSD science teachers, in particular the environmental science teachers, to adopt some of the purple air sensor information that we've been doing, or some of the work that we've been doing in regards to purple air sensor, and for them to adopt it into their curriculum, because now they're given somewhat of a tool to dissect information in a more localized level. And so in a particular example that I remember was that, before we installed purple air sensors in the city, the students would put out these agar jelly, science kits throughout the cities at random locations. And after X amount of days, they'd go back and collect them, and then they'd all kind of take a guess at which part of the city had the highest amount of particles. And so since the installation of our purple air sensors, now instead of doing that, that experiment, now they're able to dissect information directly from our sensors. And so that's somewhat of the citizen science that we're able to do. And also another example is that, everybody that installs a sensor basically is able to understand the errors that are in their home or around the home, and how everybody's air is a little different. Even though your neighbor may have a sensor, their air quality specifically to their building may not be the same as yours. And so this is and an example that I typically give people is that if your neighbor is a smoker, and they have a purple air sensor, their readings will typically be slightly higher than the readings for you. And if your home doesn't have a smoker, or somebody in your apartment or condo is not a smoker, and so everybody's airs are a little different, and everybody is able to somewhat compare how their airs are in comparison to each other's. And so if there's no other questions, before everybody signs off, I will post I'll post the post survey in the chat box. And so before everybody signs off, if you can just fill out the post survey, that would be very helpful. This kind of allows me to gauge how much knowledge gain there was, and how and whether or not this educational workshop was truly helpful. But but feel free to ask any more questions during this time.
Alrighty, everyone. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to come to this presentation. As I mentioned earlier, this presentation was recorded and will be made available hopefully by tomorrow, or definitely by next week, to the City of Monterey Parks YouTube channel. And again, we will have the same presentation tomorrow, but it will be led in Cantonese by Kevin. So if you happen to know anyone who speaks Cantonese and is interested in it, please let them know that it's tomorrow, Friday, July 17th at 2 p.m.
Yes, and I believe, Janet, you were interested in hosting a purple air sensor. So my colleague will be in contact with you to drop off that sensor sometime either this week or next week.